r/AskReddit. Serious, what are some weird or interesting facts about your families? We recently found out that I have at least 5 half-siblings because my parents decided it would be nice and financially beneficial for my dad to make some donations around the time I was born. Lol. I initially thought you were using euphemisms and sarcasm to say your dad cheated on your mom and had 5 illegitimate children. Right? I was like, what the hell kind of donation is that? My great aunt Rose was able to escape a concentration camp due to a member of royalty in I cannot remember which exact country. After a few months in the camp, she became deathly ill and was left to die in an infirmary. This royalty was visiting the camp and saw her, asked her name and her occupation. Rose was an incredibly talented seamstress, and this person needed a tailor at their estate. So they drew up some papers declaring her a Christian, convinced the Nazis that they had made a mistake, took her into their estate, nursed her back to health, and she spent the rest of the war making and fixing clothes for their family. That's the raddest story. What a survivor. Damn. My great grandfather was also imprisoned in a concentration camp, and a wealthy Nazi family needed people to clean and wash the dishes on their estate. So they took him in. He managed to escape and steal a few pieces of genuine Nazi stamped silverware. I still have one spoon at home. My granddad was poisoning my nan's tea with rat poison for ages. She was documenting it and told the police. They did a huge bust on him and arrested him in front of all their kids, incorporated my mum. In court, he admitted to it. He agreed to all the charges. He did the deed. Eventually the judge, flummoxed, asked, but why? And his answer was, because we agreed to it. Apparently, they had made an agreement to use rat poison to home treat her deep vein thrombosis. This brand was basically a blood thinner, so the rats couldn't clot when they got injured. And they both distrust doctors. This woman is crazy, and I fully believe my granddad's side. Case got thrown out of court. If it's warfarin, it's a good anticoagulant for humans as well as a potent rat poison. Medical student here. This is correct. Warfarin is a common medicine for people who are at risk of heart attack or pulmonary embolism. Warfarin was first developed as a rat poison in the 1920s and wasn't approved for human use until 1951. My great grandfather had 21 children. Edit. This is my top comment of all time. Who knew that my years of being unable to date anyone from my county because they were related would pay off in sweet karma. His first wife and he were married around 1916, and they had a kid the first year. My grandmother was number 18, and she was born in 1934. He had 2 wives in total and the women were cousins with rhyming names, Ali and Ali. My grandmother dated Bill Clinton in high school. He had a pretty major crush on her. She broke up with him because he was in the band. Bullet dodged. For her, probably. But for the rest of us, depends on what you think of Hill Rod. I placed my newborn for adoption. Open adoption. Chose the family myself. A few years later my sister got pregnant and placed her newborn with the same family. So the children are growing up as siblings and are cousins by blood. This was over 20 years ago. Do you think they know they are cousins? You know one of them will do a DNA test and be completely shocked if they didn't know. Oh yeah, they know. The adoptions are open. They've known since they've been able to understand. But my god, if they didn't, it never could have crossed our minds that they could find out the way it's possible to today. Jack in the Box used to have a clown for the voice box in the drive-thru until my grandmother got drunk one night and shot it up after they wouldn't take her order as she walked through. I'm both afraid of her and can super relate to her. My great uncle disappeared after Vietnam. He killed his best friend playing with a gun when he was a kid and hadn't been the same after. Had a bit of a death wish. Vietnam had made him even more morose and withdrawn. So when he vanished, the family just assumed the worst and figured he had gone and committed suicide or gotten himself killed one way or another. 20 years later, come to find out, he had moved to Mexico and started a family. My grandmother got a call from his teenage daughter, letting us know he had passed away. Stomach cancer. Nobody had any idea. Dude just lit out and severed ties without saying a word. Killed his best friend plus having to deal with American public post-Vietnam War. I can imagine how someone with a lot of emotional baggage would not want to return home. Man, pretty much this. It would be hard to return home to people who you believe see you as the guy who killed his childhood friend with a gun. People say they forgive you. But can you believe them? Do you forgive yourself? My great uncle was accused of arson and murder and ran away to sea, eventually dying in a knife fight in Shanghai, according to the family story. I desperately want to know more about this. But everyone who knew the story is now dead and none of them wanted to talk about it when they were alive anyway. His sister also led a fairly adventurous but much more legal life and was lost at sea for a while, although thankfully found again. While I don't condone arson, murder, or knife fights, I do appreciate your family's love of the sea. Hey, what do you do with a drunken sailor? My great grandfather saved my life. Even though he died 89 years before I was born. He was a semi-well-known medical researcher, enough for a Wikipedia page and a family of bacteria to be named after him, who ended up dying after being crazy enough to inject himself with one of the diseases he was studying. 100 years down the line, I caught one of the diseases that he studied. His research had paved the cure of that and a few other serious diseases. Is it cool or uncool to guess who this was? This one interested me. My grandfather was the first black aerospace engineer in the United States. Wow. That's really awesome. I'd love to hear more of the story if you have more to share. Unfortunately, I barely know my father's side of the family. My grandfather died a few months after I was born. I only recently found this out when I got curious and read his obituary. My family claim that one of my great uncles was the first man in Ireland to get run over by a van. He worked the docks in Cork and supposedly got hit by a freshly delivered one. Probably just a family anecdote. But I enjoy the image of a dude pointing at a van and saying, "What in holy hell is that th?" Edit. I'd just like to thank my long dead relative for giving me my most upvoted comment. That is very sad, but also kind of funny. Never thought there being a first person to ever get run over by a specific vehicle. Ohio, USA here. I'm sure you've heard the story, but apparently, in the early 1900s, there were only 2 motorized cars in Ohio, and they managed to wreck into each other. My grandpa had been visited by Bill Clinton in our small Arkansas town and asked him for campaign donations. Backstory: my grandpa lived in Detroit and ran an illegal casino in a house. He did something for the people who had ownership on it and left town to my small town in Arkansas. The day he died, my dad received 2 letters. One from Governor Bill Clinton. Another from a senator at the time. At his funeral, a man talked to my dad and expressed sympathy for his loss. Said they were good friends in Detroit. Dad never met him ever. He would, every year, visit the grave and add flowers and clean it up. The duck was my grandpa into an inside job. It's treason then. I was born in California, but had to move to Vegas when I was 9. My mom told me the reason why is because my dad cheated on my mom with a gang leader's girlfriend and put a hit on him. The real reason is much squickier. My dad was constantly cheating on my mom, but with his first cousin. Their other cousin found out and wanted to get some with her, but she declined. Outraged, that cousin told my dad he was going to kill him. He was not joking. My mom rented a U-Haul and packed everything she could in there and told my dad if he wanted to stay with that itch, by all means, but she's not getting my brother or me involved. He had 2 days to make his decision, to stay with my family or leave. He stayed. I kinda wish he didn't, since my dad is a huge disappointment. Oof, that last sentence. Understandable though. Yeah, honestly. How bad does it have to be for Ekton to wish their dad wasn't around? My great grandmother's maiden name was Messerschmitt. Rumor has it that a relative designed the Messerschmitt planes in Germany during the First World War. There's no way to prove it though. And on the other side of the family, my great grandfather's name was James Potter. My great grandfather's name was James Potter. You have his eyes. He has his mother's eyes. In a box. My family lives on what we call a compound. Essentially they own continuous plots of land. My dad, grandparents, uncle, and cousin all have houses next to each other on the compound. Great for visiting, and we had our wedding there, on a river. Dad keeps trying to get my husband and I to join them. Nope. This sounds kind of like my family. My great aunt bought 5 acres of land, then her family members got mobile homes and moved there too. When I would stay with my grandmother in the summers, I was also visiting my great grandmother, 2 great aunts, 2 great uncles, and some cousins. We had our family reunions here until my great grandmother passed. Sometimes there were close to 100 people at those. So fun. My mother's family is the same. There's acres and acres of land that has been in her family for years, and it's split up between a bunch of her uncles and cousins, and they all live close to each other. So here's the story of how my great grandmother escaped Nazi Germany and saved a Torah older than Germany itself. My great grandmother, Uma, met my great grandfather in Tel Aviv while she was visiting her cousin. My great grandfather, Upa, had just recently emigrated from Germany and was in the process of building his house. Upa first saw Uma at the market and approached her by asking for her opinion on which tiles he should buy for his kitchen. As one does, he said he wanted to get a woman's perspective. The rest, as they say, is history. Uma wanted to stay and help Upa finish building their house and life together. But the mandatory government in Palestine had been cracking down on immigration, and particularly the marriage-based kind, because of fraud. So to prove that their love was real, Uma had to go back home to Germany for a certain period of time, IDK exactly, and maintain regular correspondence with Upa. Eventually he had to invite her to come back so they could get married. While she was writing letters from her small village in Germany, Nazi hit escalated quickly. So when Uma was preparing to leave, sometime in spring 1938, her uncle came to speak to her. He worked for the village rabbi and could see the writing on the wall. So he begged her to take one of their Torahs with her to Israel by smuggling it in the trunk, where she packed her wedding dress and all of the linens for her dowry. She was already a bride-to-be, so it wasn't much of a stretch for her to become very protective and very secretive about her wedding dress while going through German customs. Just a few months later, and that Torah would have been destroyed in Kristallnacht. The Torah she brought to Israel dates back to the 1500s. Each of the wooden handles on the scrolls has a ribbon of text commemorating all the people who donated to the synagogue so it could be written. It became first Torah to join the congregation in their new moshav. 20 years later, it sailed across the Atlantic with my Upa, and grandma. A few years later my grandma got married and moved with my grandpa to West Virginia. The Torah has lived in my grandma's local synagogue ever since. It is no longer considered a kosher Torah today because many letters have faded with time, and it's likely too old to be restored without any risk of harming the scroll. So while it's retired from daily use, it continues to steal the show at family bar mitzvahs. And every year at Simchat Torah, the holiday, where we read the final portion of the Torah covering Moses' death. Start at the beginning with the story of creation, and bring out all the Torah scrolls in the synagogue for a night of singing and dancing. This one was my favorite. TL. Dr. Great-Grandad survived a coal mine collapse, escaped the Mayfair, and lied his way into the US Army all at the age of 16. My great-granddad, Salvatore, worked with his father in the coal mines of Appalachia until a mine collapse trapped him and a bunch of other men in the mines. He thought he was going to die, so he prayed to God and said, "Hey, if you get me out of here, I'll never go into the mines again." Lo and behold, he gets out. GG Grandad says, "Okay, glad you're safe. We are going back in the mine tomorrow." Salvatore is like, "Hell no." They get into a fight that ends with Salvatore leaving. He makes his way to New Jersey, where he finds himself working in a bordello as a translator between the Italian Mayfair owners and their patrons. Well, the mob boss's daughter catches feelings for Salvatore and the family starts pressuring him to marry the girl. Sal takes one look at the situation and thinks, this can only lead to bad things, and sneaks out of the window in the middle of the night. He makes his way down to Atlanta, and WWI is in full swing at this point, and fearing the Mayfair might try and find him, He signs up with the Navy to try and get away from America for a while. They take him in, train him up as a bugle boy and assign him to a ship. A few months later, everything is going good. The ship captain has confirmed that they are ready to set sail, and then he finds out that his bugle boy, Salvatore, isn't actually of age or a US citizen. Whoops. Well, the captain can't go back and say that he isn't ready to sail, because he would get into a ton of trouble. So he takes Salvatore down to the courthouse and explains the situation to the judge. The judge says, "No prob. I know what to do." So the captain gets him a bottle of Jack. They slip the number 17 into Salvatore's shoe. And when the judge asks Sal, "Are you over 17?" Sal says, "Yes." And they make him a citizen. Everything is in order. Sal goes and fights in the war, lives, comes back, does a bunch of other really cool shit, and dies at a ripe old age. Edit. I've had a few requests for more stories about Salvatore. So here are 2 other stories that I know about him. Sometime during or after the war, Sal must have gone back to Italy because he met a girl, married her, had some babies, and moved his family to America, where they had my grandfather. First person in the family to be born in America. At this point, this probably would have been the late 30s, early 40s. They had settled in New Jersey, and my granddad was old enough to start helping Sal with work and whatever. Now according to my grandfather, Sal, in addition to being a badass, was also a very intuitive businessman. In this town that they moved to, there were a bunch of old houses that were in decay and falling apart. Someone, I think the city, was offering for anyone to go and take them down. And whoever did could keep any scrap or salvage that they found. None of the American workers wanted to do it because they saw the houses as a big investment of time with little return, as there was nothing to salvage. But Salvatore must have saw something, or intuited something, because he went and signed up to take down those houses. And the Americans were all very happy to let the dumb little immigrant do the work for them. Well, it turns out that all of the houses had tin roofs on them, and tin was worth quite a lot back at this time. Sal had practically struck gold with this, and upon taking all of that salvage back to town, the locals were aghast and a little enraged that he was able to get all of it. Apparently they tried to take it from him, or say that he wasn't allowed to have it, or didn't deserve it or something. But somehow he was able to keep it, and he made a ton of money, which he used to buy a little bar. This is the last story, which the whole family worked. Things were going well. He was making lots of money, serving the workers of the war. And then the African American workers started showing up, too. Always at the back door. Because, I guess, it was typical for them to only be served that way. Anyway, Salvatore takes one look at this situation and says, "No. If you are going to be patrons at my bar, you're going to come in the front door like everybody else. Your money's as green as any other." Now, I'm sure all the white folk weren't crazy about it. And frankly, I just plain don't know what kind of fallout there was, if any, but it must not have been too bad. Because Salvatore was able to keep the bar open and making enough money to send his children to college totally paid for, and kept the thing until he retired. Are you over 17? That's ducking rich. Ducking. Like and subscribe.